Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome in a special Tuesday morning edition here of Guerrilla Sports Off Ice. Look, we're barreling towards the end of the offseason, so we want to make sure we are getting into everything that we are wanting to touch on before the summer ends. I'm Jesse Montano, going to be joined by Meghan Angley here in just a moment. Of course, I want to remind you guys about our great partners over at Trusted American Mortgage. Head on over, trustedamerican.com/sports. They want to help you lower your interest rate, get a better monthly payment. And if you act right now, they might even be able to help you stick a couple months of that mortgage payment back in your pocket, save some money for you. Head on over, trustedamerican.com/sports. See how much money they can help you start saving today. Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome in. I'm Jesse Montano. She is Meghan Angley. We are back. Another episode of Guerrilla Sports Off Ice. We are going to start working our way through the rest of the league here. We are about 4-ish weeks, 4.5 weeks from the open of training camp. Of course, we don't have any official dates yet for anything like that. But we are about 5 weeks out from the rookie tournament, which typically tells us we got about 1 week fewer, about half week fewer till camp starts. So we wanted to make sure that we had time to start getting into what's going on around the league. It's been a crazy summer. There's been a lot of movement with the cap going up. There's been some big contracts. So we're going to make sure we get into all of it so we can unpack everything that's going on around the league. Megan, how's it going today?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Nothing else. Just good.
Just good.
Just good. No,
you know, when we see each other like 24 hours apart, there's way less to catch up on.
No, yeah, I'm doing well. It's yeah, I mean, I was talking with someone yesterday. You know me, I'm definitely a warm weather person. These last 2 days have been a different type of hot.
It was very desert heat, reminded me of an afternoon in Vegas or Arizona.
Yeah.
Leaving
for sure.
yesterday.
Hot
sheet of warmth.
It was just there's days where it's really sunny and it's hot, but it doesn't feel that, like you said, that's a good way, but it was like desert hot yesterday. It was just convection oven E. But you're still not going to catch me complaining, because I know that we're just weeks away from that shitty, gross, cold weather that ruins half the year.
That's so dramatic because I feel like the fall starts very hot still. It's right around Halloween that I feel it turns cold.
Well, and I mean, just growing up my whole life in Colorado, that's the part of it, is you don't know. Might be mid-September, might not be till Thanksgiving, but it's coming, and you never know when. Megan, we're going to talk. I got a text and read something different on my screen right as I said we're going to talk. We're going to talk rosters, player movement, how some of these teams around the league are looking, and we're going to go division by division as to not overwhelm, get confused ourselves, anything like that. So we're going to start out east. We're going to start the Metropolitan Division today, and then we'll kind of just slowly work our way through the 4 divisions here over the next couple of weeks. Quick note before we get started, I think I see a comment about it already. Josh Manson did publish an article in the Players Tribune. I actually was about halfway through reading it when we got going here on the show. So make sure you go check that out. I always love when we get that kind of extra layer peeled back on the players, from the Players Tribune, players talking about stuff that isn't necessarily always related to what's happening on the ice.
Yeah, I can't wait to read it. Josh Manson, one of the nicest guys in the room. It's been a while since I've said that, but the shout out to him being an upstanding guy and how that translates to this piece doesn't surprise me at all.
No, and he's extremely well spoken. That was something that we learned about him right away when he arrived from Anaheim. Very well spoken, and just a little bit that I was able to read that very much comes through in his Players Tribune piece. Megan, anything we're going to be talking about the Metropolitan Division today. Anything that you want to say off the top, just about any of the teams, players, movement, anything like that? Or do you just want to get into it and we'll go kind of team by team here?
Yeah, let's just go team by team, because in kind of digging into it last night, there's a lot here to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Some teams more than others, but still a pretty good amount of interesting conversation about what's going on in the Metro and how they might look going into next season.
Well, and there's a couple teams too in this division that I really don't know what to make of. Not only because of where they finished last year, but how they got there.
The comment about 43-degree hockey.
Nice.
That's really cool.
Nice. Heck yeah. If not better than advertised. Also, the owner hand-delivered it. Nice.
That's amazing.
Yeah, Dan's the best. I'm gonna have a video coming here soon about moving all my gear from my existing bag to my 43-degree hockey bag.
And I know we said that there were 43 orders that Jesse would get in the bag. But you know what? I feel like one's good enough. Jesse's going in the bag.
All right. Well, let's start. We'll go in ascending order, reverse order. We'll go from the bottom to the top based on how they finished last season. And we're going to start with the Philadelphia Flyers, who I think that was a team that there was excitement around. They had an encouraging prior season under John Tortorella. I think there was some optimism that, hey, maybe this team could take a step. You have a guy like Eric Johnson, veteran leader, helping to usher some of these younger guys. They added a guy like Jamie Drysdale. You felt optimism, and then the wheels kind of fell off. John Tortorella ends up getting relieved of his duties. They start shipping some older guys out. There was a lot of distractions in Philadelphia this last season, but they head into the summer. They trade Ryan Poehling to the Anaheim Ducks for Trevor Zegras, taking a bit of a flyer on a young player who really a few seasons ago was looked at as one of the next like elite point producers, talented playmakers, and really hasn't gotten there in Trevor Zegras. They traded up in the draft, had a nice draft, and then they had Christian Dvorak, Dan Vladar, as well as Noah Juleson and Oliver Bonk in the offseason. Trevor Zegras is the big get here for the Philadelphia Flyers and what their moves are this offseason.
Certainly. I think this is one of those teams that I'm not sure what they are, because I think they're coming out of a period where it was undeniable that they were rebuilding. And this also going into next season looks to be a very promising young core. Like, they also re-signed Cam York and Tyson Forster this offseason, just kind of committing then to this young core, because this last season felt like they were reeling from the loss of Farabee and Frost.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those were, especially with respect to Frost, kind of young talent that I think needed a change of scenery. And they've added a little bit more that I'm curious to see then how that high-end skill up front, but with such young players, will translate to next season. And I'm excited to see a full season of Rick Tocchet at the helm, because
I didn't mention that.
I think that's going to be a difference maker then in how all of these young players get utilized, to include Noah Cates and Michkov, who had a really intriguing season and breaking out, especially with the changeover in coaching. I do think we're going to see Michkov's game just fully untethered and freed up.
Him with Zegras is the combination I'm really interested in watching.
It should be a lot of fun. And so it's very inexperienced, which is where I'm curious to see how it actually looks on the ice. But there's a lot of high-end skill among some of these youngsters. And Trevor Zegras adds a lot of necessary offensive ability that I think was missing a little bit this last season. And where there are still concerns too is their goaltending. I think Sam Ersson is a young goaltender that is trying to fully ascend to the starting goaltender role at 25 years old, is getting closer to that, but still sub 900 goaltender. And so there's some shakiness in net that I think that they want to see addressed. But it is interesting to see the way in which they've bolstered their back end with the addition of Drysdale, a young defender, and kind of the gradual emergence of Sanheim, a player that we were talking about yesterday with the Hockey Canada orientation roster, is a player that's emerged kind of. There's been this resurgence in his game, and he's emerged as a more consistent player that has more offensive ability than I think people credited him for previously. And so the combination then of York, Sanheim, Drysdale, I think are players on the back end who have more to contribute offensively than we've been able to fully see. And I wonder too if that improves the offensive bottom line, starting from the back end out with all of that talent that's up front as well. So really the thing that will be in need of answers for me with this group a little bit is the depth down the middle on that forward side. And if the maybe lack of experience among these players is balanced enough between a coach like Tocchet who can really work with these players and some of the older players like Konechny that are on this roster.
See, I just don't like this group. Like I just don't know if there's enough there. I
think it needs more depth.
Yeah, like I just like Konechny, good player. Sean Couturier, good player when healthy. Owen Tippett, has really kind of started to emerge as the goal scorer that we all thought he would be when he got drafted. Trevor Zegras, we'll see. I mean, he's been really up and down. Christian Dvorak, like you said, I'm interested in Noah Cates. But then after that, it's just kind of a bunch of guys.
Like Dvorak to me is more of a middle bottom six player that might be elevated to a higher role. And I'm nervous about that.
Well, it's one of those, I remember I used to talk about it all the time with the early 2010s apps. There was a lot of guys that played for those teams. And I'm not, Paul Stastny was a good player. I'm not trying to, but like folks talked about Paul Stastny in Colorado as this like clear-cut 1C. Well, he went somewhere else for 10 minutes and they're like, oh, you're not a 1C. You're a 2C at best. And I do wonder if there's some of that here to your point about Dvorak where it's like, is he maybe going to be asked to be playing over his head a bit here? Because that's just what the roster is going to require.
Right.
And I do wonder how many of these players are going to find themselves in that situation. Now, the Michkov Zegras thing, we talked about Trevor Zegras when his name was floating out there as a potential option for the Avs. It had been floated last year at the deadline. And we talked about like, okay, well, what does that look like? And while we talked about the potential personality issues, clash with a guy like Nate, what we did also say was if a guy like Trevor Zegras with his skill set is going to be put anywhere to succeed, it's going to be next to a guy like McKinnon, playing with a guy like Makar, things like that. I think that him landing in a spot where he can play with Matvei Michkov is going to give him an opportunity to do that. To play with a player who's going to want to play the way that he does. To your point, is there going to be enough experience there? Is there going to be enough two-way responsibility there? I don't know. And then I look at the back end where Jamie Drysdale's got to take a step. Cam York got to continue getting better. Travis Sanheim got to build off what we saw last year and, work his way onto that Olympic roster. I just think there's a lot of question marks here. And I'm glad you mentioned Rick Tocchet because I do think that could be the secret weapon to getting a lot of this stuff to work is a guy like Rick Tocchet.
I'm nervous that there's not enough veteran presence, even with a guy like Tocchet leading the ship. Just with the back end, I think there's a lot of upside with these players. To your point, if a player like Drysdale takes a step, that does change my view a little bit. But I think even talking about Michkov, Zegras, and the potential magic that they could create together offensively, there is a necessary component of a grounding veteran player too for these types of young players. You know, in the same way we talk about Toffoli with Celebrini and Smith out in San Jose, I feel like that's what's missing from Philadelphia. And the depth does kind of fall off. Because, for example, in talking about Dvorak as potentially like a 2C, I think Noah Cates, as a young player, has emerged being able to handle that responsibility in a way that really impressed, really surprised. I've been banging the drum for this player, but that's a lot of responsibility if like it's not working out with Dvorak to thrust on Noah Cates as a young player. And so I think they just need a little bit more veteran insurance in this roster for me to feel more comfortable with it, because goaltending is shaky. You need a disciplined team that handles the defensive responsibilities and doesn't kind of neglect some of why that is so important to build out in their game.
Well, I got a question for you in a second. But on their goaltending, you're paying Ivan Fedotov $3.275, and you just signed Dan Vladar to $3.35. Ivan Fedotov, they definitely took a bigger swing on that than what it turned out to be.
Yeah.
Came over from the KHL a couple seasons. I mean, he's a monster. He's huge. Really good goaltender over in the KHL. I think he even had a really good debut. Yeah, 6'7". I think he even had like a really good first week. They paid him, and he has been shaky at best. I want to ask you a question on Noah Cates. Do you know how old Noah Cates is?
I want to say, because he's one of the like collegey guys that was a captain on his former team. I want to say he's 25.
26. Okay. All right. I was just because you said it. You called him a young player twice, and I was like, "Shit, is that a young player still?"
He's, you know how
I'm
each
fine with it.
position
I'm
has
fine
a
with
different
26
trajectory.
Yeah, no, I love it.
26 actually makes me feel more comfortable because, for example, let me look at Casey Middlestat's age. I think he's around that number.
Only 3 full
26. And there was a world where we entertained Casey Middlestat as a 2C. I think the difference is Noah Cates' path to this point hasn't been projected to be that guy. And so I think it's been slower going.
Just 3 full seasons in the NHL.
But I don't know. I kind of like the winding road. I think it builds a lot of character, a lot of really good habits. There's a lot of discipline, especially when you spend a little bit more time going the college route. So I'm here for it.
Anything else on the Philadelphia Flyers?
You know, I think back to 2 seasons ago, there was this kind of ragtag team of guys who were surpassing expectations. And, you know, Joel Farabee was a part of that. Morgan Frost was a part of that. And so this team is different without those players, undeniably. But I am curious to see if they can surprise a little bit next season, especially with this young talent, and maybe have some fun. Not so different from what we saw out of San Jose, right? Like they weren't necessarily climbing for any sort of wild card spot, but they seem to be having fun. I want to see at least that with some of the young talent that's on this roster, but obviously also take a bigger step forward as a group under the leadership of Tocchet.
All right, let's move on here. And somehow this was not the worst team in the Metropolitan last year, but something tells me they will be this upcoming season. The Pittsburgh Penguins. It was last year was officially the window is closed. Sidney Crosby can't save you, despite him still playing at an unbelievable clip. The Penguins are in rebuild mode. They've all but come out and said that, you know, under Kyle Dubas, they are looking to start to tear it down. You know, you're starting to look towards the draft, 3 second-round picks, 2 third-round picks, as well as owning their own first-round pick. As you look, you won't convince me that I think the reason they're holding on to Sid right now is because they want to try to pull off the Mario to Sid to McKenna, and just keep this crazy, trend of elite level players mentoring the next one. It's been a quiet summer for the Penguins. I imagine that this is going to pick up a lot in season. Probably some contracts are going to be dealt. On draft day, they pick up a third round pick in exchange for Alex Nedeljkovic, who they send to the San Jose Sharks. They take a cap dump on Matt Dumba, picking up a 2028 pick as well. Their most notable move was addressing the goaltending that has plagued them now for the last handful of seasons, Megan, as they trade Chase Stillman and a 2027 fourth-round pick for Arturs Shilovs. Probably not a ton to say on this team. $13 million in cap space, and they are looking to sell.
Yeah, they're in rough shape going into next year. It's an aging core with limited depth scoring, and defensively, I think, is where they show a bit of that age too. And it seems like with the addition of Matt Dumba that they're not really committed to injecting more youth into this group. And so I think that weakens their defensive game. I look at players like Anthony Mantha, who had a 20-goal season in Washington just a couple seasons ago, who has dealt with injury the last couple, and he's supposed to be more of an impact in their top six. So with a full healthy season in front of him, I think that could add a little bit more to their scoring punch as a group. But the bottom line doesn't change very much with everything I just said before that. And I'm excited about the change in net with adding Shilovs, a young goaltender, because they do get a bit younger than in what they have to offer there. Moving on from Nedeljkovic, now having Shilovs in net, I just don't think things have worked out great with Tristan Jarry. And Shilovs, we've talked about at length on this show. Maybe not so different from the way in which we saw Nashville move on from Askarov once upon a time, that there's still so much potential in this young goaltender that I think organizationally for Nashville, similarly, they didn't quite have a great path for Askarov, and for Vancouver, because they want to commit to Demko, there wasn't really a great path for Shilovs, who I think went to the American League and did everything asked of him this last season. So that's an intriguing part of Pittsburgh, but they are deep in the throes of rebuild and don't appear to be making any moves to change that. So I'm not sure what this team will be next year. Obviously, the experience among those veteran players will always be valuable, but can they make the on-ice impact that they used to collectively? And I think this last season answered no.
Right. I mean, and again, like I just want to talk about a 91-point season from Sidney Crosby. Had one of his better seasons in a long time. And to your point, that doesn't really matter.
Well, and even Rickard Rakell, right? Like new personal best in his individual production. That's obviously great, but it doesn't really move the needle for the whole of that team. Rutger McGroarty, a young player, definitely in prospect territory, hoping to make an impact and kind of in a place too, there's opportunity for him to seize at this level. But just not sure really how to evaluate his impact as a prospect at this point. Some of that being limited by opportunity with Pittsburgh, but that's kind of the only youth I see the glimmer of hope with in this lineup.
Well, and I do think that the Shilovs deal, that does start to set the table for, we're getting younger. This is going to be the goalie for our next core, type of mindset. Brian Rust, Rickard Rakell, I think are all but already dealt. I think they'll be moved by the end of the season or by the trade deadline. I do also think a guy like Kevin Hayes, Anthony Mantha are on that block as well, depending on how aggressive they decide to get over the course of the season. Now, let me ask you, and I'm not talking about the Abs specifically, do you think over the course of the next couple seasons, as this continues to go this way, do we see the Pittsburgh Penguins move on from either Evgeny Malkin, who does not have as much value as Sidney Crosby does on a trade market, Evgeny Malkin or Sidney Crosby? Do you think they do it?
Absolutely. I think more realistically around Malkin, just because both players have had their names in murmurs, but there's just one more year on Malkin's contract as it is. And given the state of this team, it feels pretty easy to imagine. And then similarly, without Malkin, and even rumors of, Erik Karlsson being on the move, I see less incentive for Crosby. But I can absolutely conceive Evgeny Malkin being moved.
Well, and I don't think anybody in Pittsburgh would point fingers at Sidney Crosby or Evgeny Malkin or anything like that. Saying, oh, they didn't finish as a no, these are elite level players that have been, I mean, the face of the league for a long time. Give them their shot to go out and get and get one more. Anything else on the Pens?
No.
All right, let's move on here to one of the teams that begins to start my list of like, what the hell even is this group? The New York Islanders. Patrick Waugh staying on as head coach after finally making a GM change this past off season. Their big trade of the summer. Now, granted, they acquired 2 first-round picks. They did move on from Noah Dobson. Young, exciting player, defenseman. And then on the back end, on free agency, they go out and they add Anthony DeAngelo, Big Save Dave, Ethan Bear, Simon Holmstrom. Let's see. Those are all AHL guys. And then the big one, Jonathan Drouin, added to the group there. Patrick Waugh finally gets Jonathan Drouin. He was long after him when he was here in Colorado. Finally gets his hands on Jonathan Drouin. This is a group here. They currently sit with $1.3 million in cap space. You got Matthew Barzal, Bo Horvat, Anders Lee, JG Pajot, Kyle Palmieri, Jonathan Drouin, Anthony Duclair, Casey Cizikas. On the back end, you got Alexander Romanov, Ryan Pulak. Where I'm going with all of this, Megan, Ilya Sorokin, this is an over 30 team here that has struggled to make the playoffs. I mean, gosh, seriously, they've only got a couple of guys who are under 30 on this roster. You're right up against the cap. And now you're on a little bit of a playoff drought here. I guess they made it the season before. Doesn't matter. Missed playoffs last year. What do the New York Islanders do, Megan? Or who are these? Who are the Islanders? Is maybe a better question.
Yeah, I think like moving on from Noah Dobson was a risky, hopefully high reward team because it points to a future window that is sort of punting a little bit on what they are in this moment.
Cal Ritchie, another player to this group that's not on the official depth chart right now, but
I imagine Cal Ritchie will have real opportunity to seize responsibly. It would be more like a middle 6 role down the middle for the Islanders forward group, an opportunity that the Avs couldn't have really afforded him. I don't think they would have felt comfortable. And I think that he has top 6 ambition, and his path to playing in the top 6 in Colorado just was going to be long, winding, and probably frustrating for him as a player. So in New York, I think there's more opportunity for him to more quickly ascend to a top 6 role. But I still think he'll have to start in more of a middle 6 capacity with the Islanders. That being said, though, like the loss of Brock Nelson has created opportunity. And I've, heard like JGP's name in trade rumors, which would open a little bit in the middle because this back end's a mess. I'll get to that in a second. But moving on from Noah Dobson, a big right-handed defender who just had a near 40-point season, obviously a big move. They get some picks in return, but also a young forward prospect in ML Heineman. And that adds a little bit to the bottom line of their depth up front. But it's still a little bit questionable. And a lot of it, I think, rides on the health of Matt Barzal, who had an injury this last season that took him away for significant chunks of the season. And this is a player that I think everybody talks about with regard to his skill. And I speak about him in this way, but I feel like it hasn't really flashed in an impactful way for the Islanders in a minute. And that's what I want to see is kind of this breakout resurgence from Matt Barzal going into this season, especially in not having a player like Brock Nelson now on this group, they need some forwards to take a really big step and kind of lead from up top. And that's where, a player like Bo Horvat was very intentionally added to this group. Why I giggled when you talked about Jonathan Drouin is it's interesting that that does seem to be the big splash for the Islanders this offseason, when the way in which we spoke about him was this player that we hoped they could sign for under $2 million on this team-friendly contract, and maybe he's playing on a third line with Ross Colton.
Right.
So it's crazy. I'm excited, though, for the opportunity for Jonathan Drouin, because I still think there's a top 6 player in there. Just with Gabriel Landeskog returning to health and Drouin's game falling off a little bit in the playoffs, going back to the same way I talked about Richie, the opportunity was getting a little bit tougher to imagine.
Bad injury problems last year too.
Bad injury problems, which I'm sure the Islanders are looking at a bit nervously. But
let me just real fast. Sorry to cut you off. In his last 5 seasons, Jonathan Drouin, 44 games played, 34 games played, 58 games played, 79 games played in his first season with the Avs, back to 43 games played last year. Sorry, go ahead.
The nature of the injury is different from one another, which makes it challenging to predict his availability. But also, hopefully, there's some optimism that it's just been a string of bad luck with respect to the injuries for Drouin. And my hope is that he can stay healthy and be a huge playmaking presence in the top 6 for the Islanders to help drive a little bit more of that offense from the top then. Because I think there are some gifted players, at least within the top 6 in New York. But I kind of teased it earlier. I think the back end's kind of a mess.
Yeah.
I love Scott Mayfield. There's no disrespect there, but that is a stay-at-home defenseman, and I just don't think they've got enough. First of all, I think it's incomplete. I think that they don't have 6 players that I feel are full-time NHLers right now. It also just doesn't feel complete in general. I don't think they have a difference maker in this back end. When you start thinking about the way other back ends around the league are constructed, even just looking at contenders, there is more of an offensive punch, and there's also the balance of just a really responsible defender with a little more skill upside than the stay-at-home defenseman who also needs to be captured in a back end, right? Like, that's kind of the perfect construct. I don't think the Islanders have that right now.
Back to Drouin real quick, just when you're talking about where he kind of fits and all that, I do wonder if Patrick Waugh is going to try him, as a top line guy. Now, I also want to point out, this was an argument I made when Jonathan Drouin arrived to Colorado. When you extrapolate his totals out over an 82 game season, he was always a productive player. Always right around 60 point pace, 60 plus. His first season in Colorado, plays 79 games, 56 points, right in that range. Just 3 games missed, so right in that range. I'm gonna do some quick calculator math on the air, so you guys don't have to sit here and listen to me do this in my head. 43. Last season, Megan played at a 70 point pace. Like, there is a legitimate player here. A legitimate NHL top 6 player here. The availability is an issue. And then to the point that you alluded to, what we saw in the playoffs can be an issue for him as well. So you do wonder how much the Islanders are going to lean on a guy like Drouin. What are they expecting out of a guy like Drouin? I just want to put a bow on that, because you made it, we laugh, but you make an interesting point of, like, the Avs are looking at this guy as like a complimentary piece, and it feels like it was a big splash for the Islanders. And I think that just really speaks more towards the state of where that roster is at.
Right.
And again, I wanted to make sure to give the love to Jonathan Drouin that I do think he deserves, because he is a productive player when healthy.
This is a good addition, because you remove Jonathan Drouin, and I'm not feeling as great about the top of this lineup, because you need to see Barzal take a big step forward. And the rest has been kind of continued consistency, but across the lineup, it's inconsistent contributions. And that obviously isn't necessarily something Jonathan Drouin immediately fixes because he can be prone to struggle periods. But I agree with the point per game pace shout out that when healthy and in the lineup, it's a near point per game pace and it's impressive. And that's with kind of different roles throughout the lineup, right? Like sometimes being on a second line with a lot of changing talent around him, he still finds ways to have success. So I think he can really help this forward group find a little more offensive consistency, but his health is a big factor in that.
Yeah. And I just think he needs a little bit more with him. And then on what you were saying about the back end, I'm with you. I don't see a group of 6 here that I'm like, yeah, that's an NHL group. And you do wonder where that's going to leave them and what Patrick Waugh can get out of this group.
I'm curious, right? Because it reminds me of the state of a team formerly coached by Patrick Waugh that's in a bit of a struggle era. Because this is a team on paper that's in a little bit of a struggle era with some intriguing young talent and a player like Cal Ritchie, right? That's in the prospect pipeline here. But I also think there's maybe less, and I mean, Matthew Schaefer's somewhere in that equation. I just don't know how NHL ready.
I'm sorry. I can't believe I left him out. First overall pick, Matthew Schaefer.
But I don't know where he is in this equation, like what they're trying to do with his development. Because honestly, this team on paper seems like they are committed to restarting and building toward the future, that I don't know that they would needlessly rush anything with Schaefer either and put him in a position that might hamper his development.
Well, so you make a really interesting parallel.
Because I have concern.
Well, about the last team that Patrick Waugh coached. And what was the issue with that? Among many things. It was a veteran group that was right up against the cap. So you were left with kind of this like, well, shit, where do we go from here? Cal Ritchie and Matthew Schaefer are going to be part of this group, and they're going to help. No doubt about it. Both those players, theoretically, are going to make a difference.
They're good prospects.
They're good prospects. They're really good prospects. My concern, though, Megan, is then it really feels like you're in between right now. So you're going to get these young, high-end prospects and blue-chip prospects in your lineup, play them alongside a bunch of 34-year-old dudes, and a defense that doesn't feel that great.
I'm sure this is haunting Patrick Waugh a little bit.
Right.
I'm sure it's triggering.
This is Matthew Shane, Nathan McKinnon all over again on the third, I guess, what was it, 15-16 team that also featured Jerome McGinley.
I really want to pull up the exact roster.
This is starting to feel like something of a theme with Patrick Waugh coach teams where he cannot decide, do I want the young skill talent or do I want my wily veterans who know how to win a game? And he can't make up his mind. Now, I know he's not the coach / GM here.
But, just given what we know about him, he's probably a voice in the front office conversations.
Well, and keep in mind, they moved on from Lou Lamoriello and decided to retain Patrick Waugh. So in this transitionary period, is it Darsh? Matthew Darsh, I believe is the new GM in Long Island. Patrick Waugh is a voice that he's probably going to lean on a lot. It's Patrick Waugh. Why wouldn't you lean on him? And maybe this is your answer. Anything else on the Islanders?
No. I hope Cal Ritchie becomes No.
Gosh. I will be really interested to see what Cal Ritchie does turn out to be, because I do feel like the scouting assessment on him, depending on who you talk to, all jokes aside, I know it's a nice running joke, but the comparisons to Patrice Bergeron, that is lofty.
People get a little carried away, but he was highly touted as a prospect here in Colorado for a reason.
Well, and I was going to say, on the other side, I've seen a lot of people who have tried to discount what Cal Ritchie can be. Like, I think he's I think he's a really highly touted prospect. I think there's a reason to be excited about him. But I also saw enough areas of his game that need improvement that I am not ready to say, oh, look out for Patrice Bergeron next year.
No kidding. I mean, especially just in his own end.
Right.
The biggest strength of Bergeron's game was his two-way ability.
Yeah, right.
That was the biggest area that Carucci needed to improve on in his game.
Yeah. All right, let's stay in the state of New York, but head on into the city, the New York Rangers. This is another team, Megan, that is in the middle of an identity crisis. Under $1 million away from the cap. They add JT Miller in season last year. Then they go out this offseason. They make the big splash. Everyone knew it was coming. They add Vladislav Gavrikov to their back end in free agency. Let's see. Tyler Radish. They get Will Cooley re-signed. Derek Pouliot. Their big splash was adding Gavrikov. Now they got themselves back below the cap by deciding to move on from Keandre Miller, sending him to the Carolina Hurricanes in exchange for Scott Morrow, 2 first-round picks. They also made the decision this offseason, Megan, to finally part ways with longtime Ranger Chris Kreider as they sent him to the Anaheim Ducks. Now, you've still got Artemi Panarin last year of his $11.6 million deal. You got Mika Zibanejad. Like I said, JT Miller, Alexis Lafreniere, Vincent Trocheck has been a difference maker for him. I know our buddy Peter Baugh is really high on a guy like Will Cooley. Back end, you got Adam Fox, who maybe has taken a step back in the last couple of years. Still a really high-end player. Like I said, Vladislav Gavrikov, William Borgen, Carson Soucy. And then in net, you've got Igor Shesterkin, and then the renaissance for Jonathan Quick in Manhattan. He seems to have turned the clock back a bit here. Where are you at with the Rangers, Megan? Because this is another team that reminded me a bit of the 2022 Vegas Golden Knights, where the roster was clearly good enough to be a playoff team, but coming down the stretch just could not get out of their own way enough to string together games despite people around them struggling, and eventually just lost out enough that they kind of beat themselves. And in a division where it seemed like nobody wanted that final playoff spot, they wanted it less than the Devils did.
Yeah, no, I think the Rangers are spiraling out in a bad way. This is different from the other teams that know what they are in terms of being in a rebuild and kind of committing to that lack of movement and such. This is a team that out of desperation has had movement to clear cap space, in part to commit to a big contract with Shesterkin, and I don't blame him. I still think really highly of him as a goaltender, but that reliance upon him has become kind of a part of their identity now, because you go a year back from last and they were a realistic contender.
Mm-hmm.
I think that some of the inexperience in this lineup in terms of having that right mentality to get across the finish line, that to be able to close out games. This team lacked that mentality, but they had a lot more promise, and it's why I think they showed better in the playoffs, and obviously the year before last.
Mm-hmm.
Special teams were exposed to as just not being as versatile as, say, the Florida Panthers. And so this last year, though, I think was the fallout of that exit for them, kind of this look in the mirror as to what they really are. And I think this is where it fell apart, because there seems to be a culture and morale issue also at play in New York. So it's not just what on paper isn't quite working out for them. I think the mentality in the room has turned very sour. Not so different from how many seasons back now, we talked about the Winnipeg Jets as being a team that on paper has all the right tools, but falls apart in the postseason. And we'd hear things about issues inside the locker room. And that is where I'm at with this current version of the New York Rangers, because they were one of the worst defensive teams analytically last season. And so, this was bigger than, Ryan Lindgren, like he was just, assuming too much responsibility in New York. And I think this drove some of them needing to move on from Keandre Miller, who was doing well for them. I think, the combo of Fox and Miller was a great thing, but they couldn't afford to keep that together. And it was the part of the lineup that they were maybe the richest, I'll put it in quotes, but some of that's because they handcuffed them to Shesterkin in that contract moving forward. And so as a result, they punted on a little bit of what they can be defensively, and it had real results. And I think that morale issue translated to poor team defense on the whole, and they're still dealing with cap constraints, so they're not able to round out this forward group that has dealt with some stagnation. So, the addition of Gavrikov helps improve the back end with a player who is a staple on the Kings blue line and is a steady 20-minute a night guy. Like, that's going to be good, but I'm just worried about the culture of this Rangers team.
So that's what I was going to say. For me, like, I look at this group, and when you say, why didn't it work last year? I'm with you. It seemed like it got to a point, and again, not unlike Vegas in 22, where you're just like, it's just not going to work. It's in your head. You're gripping the stick too tight. You're expecting for things to go wrong. I think there was some personality issues in that locker. I think there were guys who maybe didn't get along. And then once things started to slide, I mean, you trade your captain, Jacob Trouba, who, while he maybe wasn't being ultra effective on the ice, it was clear by player reaction they did not appreciate the way that went down. They all spoke very highly of Jacob Trouba and what he brought to the room. So that felt like it maybe fractured it a bit, and guys struggled to ever get back on track. Again, not unlike that 16-17 Avs, which actually near the end of the season, I think the closeness in the room was the only thing that salvaged it. But it was just one of those where it was like, nothing that you're going to do is going to work. And you just have to accept that for this season. I think the Rangers are a candidate to bounce back. This is a team that went to the Eastern Conference Finals 2 years ago. Yeah, they look a little bit different now, but I think this is a team that's going to bounce back and at least be more competitive, and I think a playoff team this year.
I think they need to cure the apathy inside the locker room, because I think that's what crept into their game, and they had players with talent not caring as much as they should, giving 80% effort. And this isn't me accusing the player I'm about to mention of this specifically, but they need Lafreniere to take a big step forward. It's now critical more than ever, especially with the loss of Kreider, who was this big net front presence. They need the strengths then of Lafreniere's game to shine through. And it's not necessarily the net front presence that is the strength in his game, but they need the playmaking ability to shine through going into this next season. And in talking about apathy, I think a full season with JT Miller without the drama can be helpful in that. Now, this is an interesting player. He can be volatile, right? But he cares. I don't know if there's a guy out there who cares more, right? Like, that's usually where the conflict arises with Miller and teammates. So this is kind of a dangerous game that they're playing here with Miller. This is exactly what this team needs, is a player who cares and will enact that kind of change in the room. But if that doesn't work, it's going to become volatile. And so it's so important for them to figure out giving a damn this next season. That sounds drama. Also, just wanted to shout out Will Cooley. This is a player who has surpassed expectation, now like the 45-point player. And I just think he was viewed more so in a depth capacity previously. Excited to see him continue to build on that and continue to surpass expectations. But they're going to need a lot of players to either continue to be the best version of themselves or take that next step. And so there's a few players that I don't think we've seen be the best version of themselves to date, and Lafreniere is one of them.
Let's move on here. I agree with you. Lafreniere, he's been a guy that's been really, it feels like season by season, it's like, oh, this is what we were waiting for. You need more from him. This is what I've been waiting for. He needs to take that step and start hitting the consistency. Moving on here, a team that I think really surprised a lot last year with how well they played, how cohesive of a unit they were, and ultimately how far they were able to take it despite just barely missing out on a postseason ticket. The Columbus Blue Jackets, again, now this isn't even a more interesting team. They missed the playoffs by 2 points last season, despite being projected preseason to be a lottery team at the very bottom, among the favorites for Matthew Schaefer in the Matthew Schaefer sweepstakes. Sean Monahan, Charlie Coyle, Dmitry Voronikov, Kirill Marchenko, Boone Jenner, Matthew Oliver, Miles Wood, Cole Sillinger, Igor Chinnikov, who has requested a trade, Kent Johnson, Adam Fantilli, Isaac Lundestrom, Zach Aston Reese. On the back end, you got Zach Werenski, who had an outstanding season last year. You get Ivan Provorov re-signed, Damon Severson, Dante Fabro, Eric Goodbranson. You got Elvis Merzlikins in net. $16 million in cap space, Megan. I'm not sure what to make of this team. It's obvious that this was a really tight-knit group last year. The remembering the life of Johnny Gaudreau was a theme for them all season. They did an amazing job honoring him all year, and you have to imagine that was something that was a rallying moment, or not a rallying moment, but something to rally around inside that locker room before they went on the ice for every game.
Yeah, this is a team that I think has a chance to build on their season last year and have an even better one coming into the next. I think what I'm seeing in terms of how the front office has treated this team, they're committed to making them better responsibly. And so I look at the back end, there's a couple of reclamation projects there that I think have some upside, but they also have now some confidence in Werenski when healthy is in a Norris conversation. He's that good. And similarly, they've got the steadiness of Provorov also locked in. And so even though there's a couple of reclamation projects in what I'd consider Fabro and Damon Severson, Matachuk to a different degree, I think Eric Goodbranson's kind of the stay-at-home defender, veteran presence to kind of anchor the back end from the bottom. You've got Werenski leading the way at the top. Fabro's a player who's fallen from grace a little bit, but among those reclamation type players that I still think have upside, I think it's constructed very well. And then in the forward group, I think it's a decent blend of young talent coming up through the ranks that they're trying to give proper opportunity to while not rushing their development. And then some older experienced players in Monahan, Boone Jenner. And I think the addition then of Charlie Coyle has more significance in representing the experienced veteran leadership, especially given what role he's had on past teams, while addressing a need down the middle that they needed to fill up, at least at the bottom of their lineup. And they do that with Lundestrom as well for that fourth line, a player known for his two-way game, not so different from how the Avs viewed Jack Drury as being a helpful piece to round out the bottom of the lineup. And so when I look at this Columbus Blue Jackets team, I see a lot of care from their front office, and that's what excites me about their future. It's not fully complete, and I think goaltending remains a bit shaky for them. But I also look at the available cap space and the other commitment I've seen for them rounding out this team, that I think this is a team that's going to continue to get better because they have a very present parent in the driver's seat as far as the front office goes.
Megan, I think this is the first team we disagree on. I see this as a team that's going to take a big step back this year. I think you're banking on, not you, if you're the Blue Jackets. I think you're banking on Adam Fantilli and Kent Johnson taking really big steps here, which is possible. But otherwise, I think you got a bunch of middle six guys here. Up front, I think Zach Werenski is a truly elite defenseman. And then to your point about that steadying presence of Ivan Provorov, completely agree with you there. I think you have too many show me deals on your back end, and I just don't think you have enough highly impactful players up front. I do think this is unfortunately a team that probably sinks back a little bit this year. I don't think they're going to be the worst team in the East or anything like that. But I do see them finishing with a lower point total than 89, which is what they had last year for me.
I feel like that doesn't give Sean Monahan and Boone Jenner enough credit, because Boone Jenner missed some time early in the season last year. And when he returned, not only did he return to full health, kind of hit the ground running, it galvanized the team further. And so as much as I've been clamoring for Boone Jenner to come to Colorado, if he stayed a part of this group, I think that he represents some more experience and skill at the top that is aging in his career, but he came back and had a pretty decent impact. So I think those two players make it a little better on paper. Like, I'm not saying they're going to the Stanley Cup final.
No, I know you're not. Yeah.
But I think that can make a difference.
See, now
they got a little meaner too.
Yeah, well, and
at the
maybe
bottom of the lineup.
It's maybe a little unfair because I've never been a big Boone Jenner guy. I've always thought he was really overrated.
Boone Jenner hater.
I've just always seen him as a kind of like a little bit of a charged up version of what Andrew Cogliano was for the Avs. And Sean Monahan, great resurgence last year, but this is another player whose game had, fallen off a cliff up until a little bit of a resurgence last year. I just got to see them do it again. Boone Jenner has to play above what he's been his whole career, which is a second, third line kind of tweener. And he's got to be a real second line guy. And you've got to get the best version of Charlie Coyle that you can possibly get. Like I said, you've got to see steps from Sillinger, from Johnson, from Fantilli, and those reclamation projects on the back end have to start working out to some extent. I'm not saying none of that is possible. I just think when I look at this team on paper, I see a group that a lot needs to be added. Then on top of all of that, Elvis Merzlikins has just turned out to be a bit shakier than maybe people thought 2-3 years ago.
I don't think he's the answer in that. Yeah. And given the other moves that they've made to address needs, they have to know that too. So if I see Columbus get serious about goaltending, and I don't need them to act desperately, so it maybe doesn't happen immediately. I want them to find the right fit, right? I think that this team gets a lot more easy to believe in. But
100%. Well, and to your point too, they have a lot of money to spend. If they decide they want to go out and spend it, that can get them there as well, or, start to close that gap a bit. All right, let's move on back to, I was going to say the metropolitan area, the tri-state area, New Jersey Devils. Again, we're another team that preseason, I think, had a lot of hype given how well they had played the season prior and right there on the doorstep. And then they kind of ended up having to back their way into the postseason themselves. And another team that is just kind of in a funny spot. They do add, get Jake Allen on a new 5-year deal, 1.8 per. They added Evgeny Dadonov, who I think is this. I'd love to know what Evgeny Dadonov is like behind closed doors, because he's such a productive player given how much he's bounced around. There is something about this player that doesn't keep him in the same spot for too long, but he does seem to find quiet production. They also add Cody Glass through free agency as well. Jeremy Hansel ends up a Devil this summer while they move on from Shane Bowers. Let's see here. Daniel Sprong. That was last season. Excuse me. I was going to say, I thought he was headed to Russia. Timo Meier at the top. You got Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, who I am a huge fan of. Nico Hischier, Andre Palat, Dawson Mercer, Cody Glass, Curtis McDermott, Connor Brown, Evgeny Dadonov. On the back end, you got Dougie Hamilton, Brett Pesce, Brendan Dillon, Jonas Siegenthaler, Jonathan Kovacic, and then Luke Hughes as well, who is still without a contract. And then you do have Jacob Markstrom and Jake Allen in net. Megan, I feel like on paper, similar to the Rangers, this does not feel like a team that should have stumbled down the stretch as much as they did and have to scratch and claw up to the bitter end to get into the playoffs. But that's how it went. Your thoughts on the Devils?
This is a team that I think I've undersold a little bit this last season, kind of unfairly. So I'm trying to have a more fair view of this team. And I think that last year, the storyline was injuries and a lack of forward depth behind the core. And so I think in losing Jack Hughes, for example, that had a big impact just because I think there's a lot of talent up top, but it exposed maybe a little bit a lack of depth. And so maybe that's where I struggle to fully get on board with the Devils. But I think the addition of Dadonov and Connor Brown actually helps to round out the depth for this team in a way that makes it a little easier for me to buy in. I think too, Jacob Markstrom had a good year, but they want bigger and better going into this next year. And that's acknowledging that he had a good year. I think that he finishes with a 900 save percentage and was actually a really solid goaltender going into the playoffs through those 5 games, 911 save percentage. So I think they need him to not only continue to be that, but maybe even more. And it's because I think there were some defensive inconsistencies on the whole, but it's nothing that I think is irreparable for this group moving forward because there is so much talent on paper. So I'm looking too on the back end to see what this next contract looks like for Luke Hughes and what they do with Dougie Hamilton, whose name has been floated around a little bit.
Another player that I just would love to know what it is that, like, such a good defenseman cannot find a consistent home.
I've heard with him, there's maybe an attitude thing. With Dadonov, I have never heard that. And you know what I think it is? This is just my theory off the top, is he is effective enough as a player, consistent, effective, that he probably could justify commanding a little bit more money that teams who are putting him in the bottom of the lineup can't justify. It's kind of like the way we couldn't justify Miles Wood money on a fourth line.
Right.
Though I would say Dadonov is more effective. I think teams just find themselves in a tough territory trying to navigate the cap balance that all these teams we're talking about are struggling with in different ways. So I think that's all it is with Dadonov, is he's kind of on the fringe in terms of what he is as a role player.
He was 20-20 last year.
It's
40-point season.
It's good. It's just like, how much do you want to pay that? How much can you afford to pay that?
And it's also been a lot of injuries and a lot of missed time throughout his career. So I think that's part of it as well.
So I don't know, that's kind of my quick off the top look at this team, because I think different from Columbus, who I think is trying to address some of the needs, I think they're pretty well rounded. Obviously the forward depth was maybe a little bit where there was concern, and they just need guys to continue to be the best version of themselves. Not so different from how I talked about some of the players in New York, because I think there's a lot of talent at the top of this lineup, obviously.
Yeah. A lot of talent in this group. Looking for them to put it together more efficiently than they did last year. All right, we are at an hour, so we're going to go through these last couple pretty quickly. I think one of them is pretty straightforward, then another one is going to be a really interesting team. The one that I think is the most straightforward, for my money, Megan, the best regular season team in this division, it's the Carolina Hurricanes. This is a group that, boy, oh boy, was last year a whirlwind for them. We talk about how much of a whirlwind it was for the players that were involved in those series of trades. I imagine that was a tough road to navigate internally. Those are tough conversations and messages that you need to be having with your group. You have a top flight player that comes in that you're kind of saying, okay, this is the guy that's going to help take us over the top right now this year. And then the way it ends up being portrayed publicly, and I'm sure the way some of the players felt, whether it was what Mikko meant or not, was this guy doesn't want to play with us, doesn't think we're good enough, doesn't want to live here, doesn't want to be a part of this organization. They go out and add Logan Stankoven in that deal. And you and I had talked about it, that maybe this ends up being this kind of galvanizing, rallying moment for them. And it looked that way until they got to the Eastern Conference Final. So what do? They go out this summer. They had Keandre Miller via trade. We talked about that earlier. And they get Nikolai Ehlers, as well as Tyson Jost. You get Logan Stankoven extended, but the big fish there is You had Keandre Miller. You had Nikolai Ehlers. I don't know how much Nikolai Ehlers actually moves the needle for me on this roster. This was actually the one place that I felt you're just adding another very same type guy with some injury issues. But if he can stay healthy and if he can be there, that's definitely a nice added punch. I think this is probably the top team in the division, but I don't know if it's a Stanley Cup team.
Yeah, I think the big swings in Ehlers and Miller add a layer of intrigue for me because
absolutely
with Ehlers, I feel similarly that in talking about him in Colorado, for example, I worried way too much about his availability, injury proneness. He always seems to miss some time each season. But I've also felt I'm really in his corner. I like him a lot as a player. I felt that he hasn't been utilized in all the right ways coming from Winnipeg, that there would be bursts, moments where he is used in a way that I think helps his game to thrive, and other times buried a little bit too deep in the depth chart. And so I'm excited to have that question or concern truly answered then, because the opportunity's here for him. I think Carolina got a great player in Stankoven in, the Rantanen trade. But it still left a hole, right? Because Netchus, though I think his role was diminishing a little bit, or at least inconsistent at the end of his time, his points pace was still ridiculous leaving Carolina. That left a production hole then to be filled. That in losing Rantanen too, though Stankoven helps, they still needed to add. And so Ehlers does improve that some. And my hope is that, and I'm sure Carolina's hope is that concern of, maybe he's not being utilized in the right way. It's time for Nikolai Ehlers to truly demonstrate that. And I think there's more optimism around him being able to do that. I think there's more pressure on him, though, to be that in Carolina, in the same way we were talking about Duran, and just a little bit more pressure in his role and impact than with the Islanders compared to what it was in Colorado, where he was playing kind of alongside or behind the likes of McKinnon up top, and that helped to alleviate some of that pressure. Ehlers will be fully in the spotlight, and I know some of his justification was to get out of the spotlight a little bit, feeling it bright at times. I fear that is not going to be the case. It's going to be pretty bright on him, but it's make it or break it for him in terms of what he is right now. And Keandre Miller obviously improves the back end for the Canes going into next season, a back end that I think was an aging back end with Burns and Orlov. And so now with Keandre Miller and Jacob Slavin, I think that it got a little bit younger. There's a lot of talent now up top. So I'm excited to see how that comes together, because this is a group, under Brenda Moore, that has a really strong defensive identity. And I think that is sort of what cost them too, is they lost a little bit of that killer offensive instinct in the playoffs. That's ultimately what did them in, I think.
Well, and it was part of the reason why I genuinely felt for them that the Mikko thing didn't work out, because a player like Mikko Rantanen, in my opinion, is what the Carolina Hurricanes have been missing. And my concern with them when Nikolai Ehlers had a decent postseason for the Hurricanes.
Jets.
For the Jets.
Don't worry.
Thank you. Sorry. For the Jets. Really, the bulk of his production, all of it, came in the second round. I worry that they got another guy who's going to play a little too soft and just get chewed up by the Florida Panthers. The Carolina Hurricanes are not tough enough to play against in the playoffs, and they don't have a guy who can go out and take over a game the way Mikko Rantanen did in the third period of Game 7. And as much as I'm with you, I like Nikolai Ehlers. I just don't think he's the guy to do that. So I completely agree. I think you're going to have Keandre Miller next to Jacob Slavin. I think that is a really stout pair. I think you're going to be an even more dominant regular season team. I did not see them do anything this offseason that makes me feel differently about when they run into the Tampa Bay Lightning or the Florida Panthers, or these teams that are just going to ground and pound their way to a series win. I still don't think Carolina can compete.
I think that's an interesting shutout. Like the forward or defenseman equivalent of what Josh Manson is to the Avs in the playoffs in particular. that kind of mean streak that he adds, in addition to being a highly skilled player, I don't see represented forward or D for the Carolina Hurricanes. And it does matter. Obviously, Florida's filled with guys like that, and that's part of their thing. It's kind of their identity.
Right.
And so not every team can be constructed that way, but you still need to have it represented in some way. And even the Avs get criticized for not having it represented enough, and that's with Manson.
Right. And a guy like Gabe Landeskog now back.
Now back, right? I'm not seeing that type of guy.
Sebastian Aho, Nikolai Ehlers, Andrei Svechnikov, Seth Jarvis, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Taylor Hall, Jordan Martinook. All good players. Who scares you? You know what I mean? Like you said, who's that mean player? Keandre Miller, Jacob Slavin, Sean Walker, Shane Gostisbehere. All good players. Who's going to beat you up? Who's, like you talked about a few weeks ago with Manson, who is that player that it's like, ooh, I'm not going down that wall. I'm not going down that side of the ice. And I'm not saying you have to have that, but on every line, but like you got to have some snarl to you to compete, especially out east.
Yeah, because we were talking about that. What team was it that got a little... Oh, we were talking about the potential line on Hockey Canada.
Yeah.
And that's where I think Columbus's like fourth line actually is a little bit mean, and that was just a shout out to where I think they are trying to consider a lot of different aspects in building this team. Anyways, all that to say, I think that's kind of the thing missing from Carolina.
Let's round out today's show by walking through the team that surpassed all expectations last year. And I do think that it was in large part rallying behind the Alexander Ovechkin goal chase. The Washington Capitals, 111 points last season, Megan, defied all expectations. What Alex Ovechkin did last season, I genuinely consider myself lucky to have been able to watch. That was something truly special that I don't know when the next time is. We'll see a performance like that in that type of moment, a record-breaking performance. I'm anxious to see what he does this year. You know that it's going to be a big goal of his to get past 900. That should only probably take him a few weeks. But the Washington Capitals, they are really more or less just running it back. No trades this summer. And on the free agent market, they do add Martin Ferivari, Nick Dowd, but past that, I mean, it's a lot of just, Anthony Beauvillier, a lot of filling in around the fringes, a lot of AHL kind of depth guys. I think this is a team that understands where it's at, and I think probably understands what happened last year. I think they did a good job of going out and putting guys around Ovechkin to get him to that the record-breaking mark. You had a great bounce-back season from Pierre-Luc Dubois. Tom Wilson had another good year. Dylan Strome has really kind of come into his own playing with the Capitals. But beyond that, Connor McMichael, sure. Sonny Milano, missed a lot of time. I like Jacob Chychrun on the back end. I think John Carlson's still a serviceable defenseman. And I like Logan Thompson, despite what Hockey Canada thinks. I like Logan Thompson as a goaltender.
He was still, there wasn't some sort of blip between his regular season play being as strong as it was and postseason. There's other issues that plagued them. And so, he's been steadily in categories for saves above expected, high danger save percentage, really good in these categories, and kind of consistently then over the regular season into the playoffs. He's doing everything they need him to, and they've got Lindgren,
Charlie Lindgren was
behind
good last year
him too. That it can be kind of this 1A 1B thing too that balances that workload. And so Thompson, a player who has had injuries in the past, with a very good goalie tandem to help maybe minimize some of that workload too. It's a really good goalie situation.
I'm going to say this is a step back team this year, but Megan, my August 5th prediction is that this is still a playoff team, maybe a wild card team. But if they continue to get some of those contributions from around the lineup they did last year, even with Alex Ovechkin likely not being on the same type of historic pace, I think this is still a team that could win enough games to get in. But I definitely think this is a, 15-ish points, 15-point-ish step back group.
I do view them as taking a bit of a step back as well. I also want to give them some credit. I think they gelled really well in rallying around the OV record, and I think it just brought them close as a group. So I think culturally, there's probably a good mix that's here.
Very little turnover too.
I think that reflects that, right? Like for Havari, a player that had a good season last night, kind of ascended to this 20-minute-a-guy night that they could count on. They need more production from the back end on the whole outside of Chychrun, who has contributed more than his fair share, right? Like that has continued to be a steady part of his game. I think they want to see a little bit more contribution from the back end on the whole. But all that to say, I think this is a good mix of guys who really like each other, and I don't want to underestimate how that can translate on ice. I think the success in reclamation projects in Strome and PLD has been really awesome for them. I think even getting what they have out of Connor McMichael, kind of like the way we talk about Will Cooley, just surpassing expectation. Like if Connor McMichael can continue to produce at the clip he did this last year, that gives them a lot of diversity offensively, because it hurt them in the postseason. And here's where I'm not sure I'm totally convinced of the Washington Capitals. Their power play dried up in the playoffs. And in talking about like a lack of killer instinct with Carolina a little bit, I worry about that with Washington. I think they have the experience absolutely represented in Ovechkin, but outside of him, I don't know if they have enough guys who get it to help them get across the finish line.
Tom Wilson, but yes, otherwise I agree.
That's, okay, Ovi and Tom Wilson.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, like outside of that, I agree with you completely.
So I'm excited to see the continued development of Ryan Leonard as a young prospect that I think gives them a little bit more time in this window. I think that the addition of Chychrun a season ago just made that back end a little bit more dynamic, but I just need to see a little bit more because they were a great regular season team and some of the inexperience was exposed in the playoffs.
Yeah. John Carlson shout out as well for a veteran experienced guy on the back end. But I think we see a lot of these teams pretty similarly. I think this, in my opinion, Megan, is the weakest division in the league, probably heading into next season. We'll see where that ends. But I think this is the division with the most question mark teams. I think as we move our way through the rest of the league, there's going to be a lot more separation in teams at the top versus who's kind of in the mix. I think this is definitely the biggest grab bag of a division for me.
Yeah, I think what's tough is it just doesn't feel as competitive as what the other division previews are going to look like, especially as we move into the West. Yeah. And there's a bias, right? Like that's just where our familiarity lies. But I think this exposes where there is a little bit of disparity from conference to conference, just in starting in the Metro.
100%. All right, well, that's going to do it for today. Went a little bit long, but you know us. We're just yappers. I'm Jesse Montano. She's Meghan Angley. John behind the glass again today. Thank you guys all so much. Big shout out to John for sticking with us. A couple long shows these last few episodes. So big shout out to John. I'm Jesse. She's Megan. Thanks so much, guys. We'll talk to you on Friday. Have a good one.